Happy New Year. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're located on planet Earth. Welcome to 2021. Very, very surprised, man, that we are in 2021 already. And this is our first live stream of the year. You're tuned in to the PulseWave Report with yours truly, Dex Diago Capitalist, aka the Vulcan. Coming to you live from PulseWaveTrading.com, home of the world famous PulseWave Price Trigger Reports that kicked the market's butt last year. So a big round of applause for the PulseWave Reports doing what they do best. You see, that's one of the hallmarks of the system, of the methodology, is the alerting system, the rally and crash alerts that we give you, along with the continuation pattern money flow reports and alerts that let you know which side of the table you should be sitting on any given day and any given market, from cryptos to forex to equities to futures. We do it all. And we've extended our discount on the website. If you go to PulseWaveTrading.com, you have until the 7th. That's right. You have until January the 7th to take advantage of our new 2021 pricing before it is gone forever. So if you want to break bread with us, learn how to navigate these markets and build an income stream for you and your family, you're going to want to go to PulseWaveTrading.com ASAP and get it in. So for those of you who were partying so hard and didn't really pay attention to news and things of that nature, well, we're sitting here with the mighty Bitcoin Futures Composite Index topping out at 34,170. We're now trading at 32,245, up $2,860, which is absolutely incredible. Gold futures are also doing a little something, up $48.20 an ounce at $1,943.40 an ounce. Silver's up a whopping $1.17 an ounce at $27.58 per ounce. Crude oil right now is just pretty much where it was last year. It's at $48.30 a barrel. And your nat gas right now is at $2.63. So, things are what they are. But the other big story is the U.S. dollar, now at the 89 handle. We're at 89.54, down a whopping 38 pips. Soybeans also really exploding today. This is what used to be limit up. If this was back in the day, I would be telling you that soybeans are limit up. They're up 27.5 points, trading at 1338 and a half. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, a explosive move in the beans. Don't know what's going on there, but beans right now are just smoking this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my belief that the markets are setting up for a major pullback. I think we're going to see pullbacks in all asset classes, every asset class, as people are now back full-time at work. The holidays are over. The weekend is over. The vacations are over. And now it's time to go back to work. It should also be noted that it seems like no senior, not one person took advantage of the year-end tax break for taking early distributions on 401ks and things that matter. That emergency legislation that was passed since last year was such a terrible economy for most people. It seems like no one took advantage of that. That was a big concern, that it was going to crash the market going to the end of the year, and that is not what happened at all. It didn't happen at all. So that is a scary notion, because if people aren't touching that, that means they're drinking the Kool-Aid, and they believe in their heart that the economy is going to be growing and that this is going to be their year and everything's going to be better and yada, yada, yada. I don't think it's going to be that at all. I think it's going to be the opposite. As you know, President Trump is still doing his thing, trying to uncover the conspiracy behind the election. And so it's still not over yet. We don't know who's going to be inaugurated on January the 20th. We will find out. But that is an uncertainty that needs to be dealt with sooner rather than later. Excuse me. We now know why Venezuela was going through what it was going through. And that is because, first of all, they were being forced to do Voldemort's bidding. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Lord Voldemort has finally bent Venezuela into submission. The talks, just talking to them didn't work. So in 2020, Lord Voldemort took crude oil to a negative $100 per barrel, which is something that is never, ever supposed to happen. It's supposed to be impossible to happen, but it happened in 2020. By doing so, it cripples the import-export side of things with the crude oil, and it bankrupts those nations, those industries that are primarily a crude-based economy. So that got their attention. Then they start cutting off their money supply with the central bank, finally putting the country into financial ruin. Now they have decided that they are going to play ball, and they will be the guinea pig for the central banks to push forward their agenda. So they have agreed to become the first 100% cashless society. They're going to be moving to 100% digital money. Ladies and gentlemen, Venezuela is going to be the guinea pig. And you better believe that there are more chips to fall on the table. Europe will be next, the UK will be next, and so will the US. Why, you may add? Why would you think they would do that? I know a lemming is screaming in my ear right now. I know, it's because, money it carries the coronavirus. So if you go all digital, then people won't get sick. Cashless digital currency is putting the bank cartel that has been running the world economy for over 100 years. You'll be giving them direct control of every single monetary transaction, making it quite easy to impose negative interest rates, making your acceptable social credit score a requirement to eat and live indoors, making escape from the confiscatory taxes unavoidable. And you can add on to that and keep on going until you hit the door. All this is part of the Great Reset. That's all right, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the United States of corporate socialism. This is where we're waking up this Monday morning. It is what it is. Okay? According to F.A. Hayek's introductory essay to collectivist economic planning, socialism can be divided into two aspects: the ends and the means. The socialist means is collectivist planning, while the ends, at least under proletarian socialism, are the collective ownership of the means of production and the equal or equitable distribution of the end products. Now, distinguishing between these two aspects in order to set aside the question of the ends and to focus on the means, Hayek suggested that collectivist planning could be marshaled in the service of ends other than those associated with proletarian socialism. So an aristocratic dictatorship, for example, may use the same methods to further the interest of some racial or other elite, or in the service of some other decidedly anti purpose. But here's the problem. Collectivist planning might or might not run into the calculation problem. depending on whether or not a market in the factors of production is retained. Now, if a market for the factors of production is maintained, then the calculation problem would not strictly apply. But the collectivist planners of the Great Reset do not aim at eliminating markets for the factors of production. Rather, they mean to drive ownership and control of the most important factors to those enrolled in stakeholder capitalism. Now, the productive activities of said stakeholders, meanwhile, will be guided by the directives of a coalition of governments under a unified mission and set of policies, in particular, those expounded by the WEF itself. This is where we are going. Remember, you will own nothing and you will love it. That is the end game here, ladies and gentlemen. How was it so easy to arrive at this situation? Easy, just by destroying the education system. Once you do that and people don't know how to think anymore and can't make decisions for themselves and have to look to government to make decisions for them, well, you just made their job a lot easier. How is that even possible? Well, look at it this way. You want proof? I'll give you some proof. Take, for example, the news that the FBI is investigating Hunter Biden on suspicion of money laundering and foreign influence peddling. Given that the New York Post broke this story over 2 months ago, of course, when that publication released the incriminating evidence that was saved to a laptop owned by Hunter Biden, the story was immediately censored on social media. Of the few major media outlets that were willing to acknowledge the existence of the story, virtually all of them did so only to emphasize that the reporting was baseless nonsense. Think about it. Does that even make sense to you? When pressed on the matter by President Trump in a debate, Joe Biden boasted that 5 former heads of the CIA said the story was a bunch of garbage. A couple of days earlier, dozens of former intelligence officials had signed a statement that asserted the news had all the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation. Quote, "We want to emphasize that we do not know if the emails provided to the New York Post by President Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, are genuine or not, and that we do not have evidence of Russian involvement," the statement read. "Just that our experience makes us deeply suspicious that the Russian government played a significant role in this case." Now, Bush administration speechwriter and Atlantic editor David Frum claimed on Twitter that the story could not have been more obviously fake if it had been wearing dollar store spectacles and attached plastic mustache. Weeks after the FBI investigation of Hunter Biden was confirmed, Wikipedia still labels the entry on the matter as a conspiracy theory. Thus, in spite of emails, photographs, and video recorded evidence to the contrary, any claim that the Bidens did anything improper, let alone wrong or illegal, was deemed baseless. And yet, here we are, with outlets like Politico and the New York Times reacting to the newly confirmed evidence of an investigation as though they had just caught wind of the story, given their craven political motivated annihilation of the story back in October. One wonders what other baseless claims that pose a threat to the left's agenda might the media be lying about. The only thing that met with more journalistic skepticism than the Hunter Biden story were the claims that significant bailout fraud marred the presidential election. I know you suffer with short-term memory loss. That's why I had to bring this back up for you. I'm trying to help you to see the world other than rose-colored glasses. All right? This is what this is. Now, since November, the most obnoxious information to be encountered are the ones who claim to be devotees of evidence-based reasoning and rational thought, even while they sanctimoniously insist that you concede that there is no evidence of fraud in this election. As with Biden's corruption, no rational person could claim that there is no evidence. First, there has never been a modern American election where there was no fraud. So the question isn't really whether or not there was fraud, but how much fraud occurred. Secondly, in the case of this election, we have already documented more fraud than has been exposed in any other American presidential election. Now, the evidence-based reasoners are right about one thing, though. There is not yet definitive evidence that Trump actually won the election, but there is enormous evidence that fraudulent means were undertaken to ensure that he did not. Now, those claiming that allegations of fraud are baseless insist that there is no compelling evidence of these claims. Of course, the word compelling is a fairly subjective term. We can reasonably disagree what evidence is compelling, although the word evidence might seem more concrete. Even the definition of that term now seems up for grabs. This new instability is a troubling indicator of a knowledge crisis that threatens our democracy. In light of the constantly shifting standards for the verification of claims, we can no longer agree on the basic facts of our shared reality. Until we find that agreement, the prospects for any productive democratic deliberation are nil, let alone the prospects for healing. It's never going to happen. It's not. Most people understand intuitively that there are different forms of evidence. There is statistical evidence, anecdotal evidence, historical evidence, circumstantial evidence, and definitive evidence. Further, there is an overlap between these kinds of evidence. Statistical evidence, for example, can be combined with historical evidence. When a statistical anomaly is detected, that anomaly is that much more compelling if it is anomalous in comparison to other sets of data, but contemporary and from the past. Rational observers must acknowledge that each of these different forms of evidence vary in terms of how reliable and definitive they are in establishing a truth. Circumstantial evidence alone cannot serve as a sufficient indicator of truth. Coincidences happen, and statistically improbable outcomes do. In fact, occur, all right? Somebody is winning those Powerball jackpots, right? But when it accompanies other forms of evidence, circumstantial evidence makes a contested claim more plausible. For example, if eyewitness testimony of bailout manipulation concedes with a historically anomalous number of mail-in ballots with no selections in down-ballot races, which is a common indicator of fraud, then charges of misconduct become stronger due to this confluence of circumstantial, historical, and statistical pieces of evidence. Again, you don't need to have an IQ of 400 to understand these basic concepts. Now, each individual piece of evidence cannot be understood independently from the larger body of evidence. Indicators that might be insignificant on their own might nevertheless contribute to a compelling portrait of evidence in aggregate. Now, the irrational rush to entirely dismiss the possibility of any election fraud is enabled by the unwillingness to see the forest among so many trees. No recent American presidential election has come anywhere close to the number of process and tallying anomalies that have been reported in 2020. Now, this discrepancy itself serves as an anecdotal indicator that justifies suspicion toward the results. With that in mind, it is worth reconsidering the claims of fraud in said election. We have seen security footage of poll watchers being asked to leave in Georgia after which the remaining officials pulled containers of ballots out from under a table and began counting others, even after others were told counting would stop for the night. Another video shows a handoff of what looks to be a flash drive among poll workers. No one can claim that this is not an unusual circumstance to occur in a battleground state late in the night of a presidential election. In most criminal cases, video recordings are generally considered a highly compelling form of evidence, meaning you were caught on camera robbing a liquor store. You dig what I'm saying? So once again, these are basic tenets, ladies and gentlemen. They're not difficult to understand. Yet now the media and Biden supporters tell us the videos are missing context and prove nothing. To an extent, that is correct. Those bailouts could be legal, and there are rational possible explanations for the actions captured on video. But no one has offered such an explanation that they can substantiate. Instead, the burden of evidence seems to be placed on only one side of the dispute. If the video isn't proof of procedural violations or fraud, then what evidence would be required to prove that claim? It seems those who claim the allegations are baseless will require video footage that not only catches those poll workers in the act, but that would also show them verbally describing their actions and their malicious intent. Or perhaps it would convince the skeptics of using the video, we could definitively ascertain which exactly ballots were in those boxes, examine them, and prove that they were cast by ineligible voters or that they were inadmissible on other grounds. The problem is that these forms of compelling evidence are entirely implausible in themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you right here, right now, we're on a very slippery slope to total anarchy. All right, when crime is allowed to prosper and go unpunished, when corruption is allowed to prosper and fester without going unchecked, this is a recipe for total lawlessness. All right, when bad is being called good and good is being called bad, that's how you know you are in the last throes of death of a nation. This is evidence and proof that the United States of America is dying. It's dying from an infection of corruption of gargantuan proportions. This is where we are, ladies and gentlemen. And no one seems to be saying anything about it or doing anything about it, not even bringing it to light, just allowing this to continue. This is a dangerous precedent that is being set. Okay? This is not a good thing. Now, typically, people don't record themselves talking about committing a felony as they commit the crime. As for identifying which were the ballots in question, the progressive erosion of any safeguards or record keeping on the chain of custody in the process of manual vote counting ensures that any viable reconstruction of how the final tally was reached is impossible. Without required secrecy envelopes for ballots, with signatures are not required or ignored, with mailed ballots allowed to be counted when arriving after the day of the election, with observers removed from the process, and with no other way to determine the chain of custody for mail-in ballots, the very means of producing compelling evidence of fraud have been systematically annihilated by the procedural changes for elections across the country. In other words, the perfect crime has been committed, which shows pretense, pre-planning on their part. Okay, this is premeditated. They made sure to cover their tracks and make it so that you couldn't do anything about it, even though it's been done right in your face, right in the open. Now, these changes have been accumulating for a decade or more. But the pandemic was used to justify a flood of sweeping changes in the months before the election, modifications that conventional wisdom says plainly advantage the Democratic candidates in battleground states, as late arriving mail-in ballots tend to skew toward Democratic candidates. Given that the compelling evidence that would convince those who insist these fraud allegations are baseless, it's basically impossible to produce. We are left with circumstantial indicators of the crime. Beyond Georgia, there is a mountain of other forms of evidence from multiple battleground states: anomalous statistical evidence, comparative historical evidence, evidence and sworn testimony from witnesses to the fraud, and anecdotal evidence. Many of these pieces of evidence are compelling on their own, and yet, even taken cumulatively, we are told the claims that there was no malfeasance in the election, and it's a basis conspiracy theory. All right, that's all they have to do in the matter. It's just to say those words, and that's it. Now, these are dangerous times because there's so many dangerous precedents being set, or that were set, I should say, in 2020. The elites of our society pretend that President Trump's lies have undermined public trust in the media, and they claim that our radical incredulity is a threat to democracy. This is more gaslighting. The media itself has created this crisis. What counts as knowledge, news, evidence, and proof are now totally dependent on the usefulness of reality in advancing the objectives of the cultural left. When a certain fact is useless for that project, its status as fact is either denied, mocked, or ignored, or all of the above. Traditionally, journalism has been motivated by a burning curiosity among the reporters who pursue the news. Today, they demonize the curiosity of those with whom they disagree in order to avoid the difficult task of explaining how the accusations are baseless in spite of so many indicators of fraud. Thus, unverified opposition research in the form of the Steele dossier can circulate on the news as if it was unquestionably true and serve as sufficient evidence to open an FBI investigation. But physical evidence of Biden family corruption is immediately, without any further investigation, dismissed as so plainly fraudulent that news related to the topic will not even be allowed to circulate. So they've already crushed the story before it even gains traction. We are told to trust the science on the effectiveness of wearing masks, even as cultural elites systematically ignore biological realities when it comes to activist claims regarding transgenderism. Catastrophic anthropogenic climate change is enshrined as settled science, even as the abortion lobby continues to deny the life of a fetus with a heartbeat, reducing it to a clump of cells. When it comes to the climate, scientific reality is supposed to be the primary determinant of public policy. In regard to abortion, scientific reality is reduced to merely one more perspective, which makes no particular demand on policymaking. So, fantastical accusations that Brett Kavanaugh was a serial rapist justified 1,000 columns and a circus masquerading as a confirmation process. Meanwhile, much better corroborated allegations that Joe Biden digitally penetrated a woman against her will are studiously ignored or attacked. Now, in the former case, where the accusations decreased the prospects of a conservative appointment to the bench, the mere existence of an accusation was proof of misconduct. In the latter, where the accusations might stymie the prospects of the Democratic presidential candidate, the accusations were found to be lacking the requisite evidence for serious consideration. You see how they get to tell you and pick and choose what truth is and is not? Truth is truth when it suits their own agenda. Truth is a lie when it doesn't. Journalists lectured the nation about the vulnerability of the American voting system to interference in 2016, only to insist 4 years later that any assertions related to domestic election interference are patently ridiculous. All this to say nothing of the fact that the media's unending effort to manufacture and influence public opinion is a form of domestic election interference in itself. And yet, the field of journalism continues to celebrate itself for being uncompromising defenders of truth. Really. And American people are eating it up and not even questioning it or pushing back. Now, those who are not fully asleep, you recognize that these manipulations have cost the country enormously. The very institutions that Americans have historically relied on to seek and convey the facts about political life has become a nonstop psyop aimed at advancing a particular ideology. And when that objective requires distortions or ignorance of reality, most journalists are perfectly happy to comply. No questions asked. Okay, it's pouring down, raining outside, but you want us to tell American people it's not raining, it's sunny? No problem. Hey, don't worry about my journalistic integrity. I don't have any. That's basically what it comes down to. Crazy. Now, ultimately, people no longer know what to believe, rightly so, which means that they also don't know what not to believe. Only when our shared notion of reality is in radical flux could theories as ludicrous as Pizzagate and QAnon take hold. And while the cultural left maintains that these sorts of conspiracies are a threat to their interests, the truth is the opposite. The left benefits from this sort of fantastical reasoning. It provides support for their refrain that their opponents are cognitively damaged. Further, it undermines any conservative claims to truth that oppose the left's account of reality. Hyping the most outlandish theories on the right justifies the mocking dismissal of even well-supported plausible assertions. Now, the media's efforts to curate the information available to the public would be easy to circumvent if those efforts were undertaken by the media alone. But the mass media is only one branch of a much more expansive coalition of power actors working to implement a re-imaging of public life in the Western world. This project is advanced through a coordinated effort by the elite segment of our societies, people in the media, the technology industry, academia, public education, government, Hollywood, and the cultural industry and corporate boardrooms. This is a big giant squid with many tentacles, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the public's confusion regarding what is true is the product of a purposeful effort by the great institutional powers of our society. When uncertainty, skepticism, and disbelief reign, there are fewer true believers. The resolute commitment of true believers to a cause is a prerequisite for any successful revolution. Thus, the pervasive uncertainty of many Americans works to diminish the prospects for organized grassroots resistance to the elite consolidation of power in this nation. Can you not see this? Can you not see this? I talked about this back in 2013 on the late great Charlie McGrath's radio show. I talked about that. I said they're going to make it impossible for any type of grassroots resistance against the elite to happen because they've so successfully dumbed down the society. They've taken away the people's will to even fight. These are facts. Take a look around you. Now, in the media's gaslighting about the legitimacy of or illegitimacy of the elections in 2020, we can discern one of their most inventive ploys for cultivating this knowledge crisis: the false conflation of evidence, proof, and truth. These are three discrete concepts, but they are increasingly treated as one by the major media outlets. For example, there can be substantial evidence for a claim that is nevertheless unproven. Then there exists truths for which there is neither evidence nor proof. Even more torturous is the fact that there are some things that are proven with evidence that are nevertheless false, but the left recognizes none of these distinctions. They falsely maintain that there is no evidence for claims of election fraud, when what they mean is that there is no proof that fraud produced a false outcome. Now, needless to say, the erroneous conflation of these concepts is used to undermine claims of truth that are undesirable for the left's agenda. Their conflation is also used to advance proofs for claims that the left would like to be true, despite the fact that they actually only have circumstantial evidence. Consider how Russian collusion circulated for years as a proven truth, even though there existed only the barest biased indications of its possibility. Consider how one woman's uncorroborated assertion that she was pinned to a bed 30 years ago by a future Supreme Court nominee on a date and in a place that she could not recall was sufficient to append the entire constitutionally mandated process for confirming a justice to the highest court. Similar examples of this rhetorical misdirection by the left are legion. Our knowledge crisis is a deliberately manufactured means to undermine public confidence and a shared sense of what is real, as a means to minimize the prospect of organized opposition to the new order that our elites are working to install. This crisis demands that each of us rely on our own perceptions, perhaps more than we ever have. Doing so takes courage, especially given that saying what you saw, when it undermines the narrative, ensures you are degenerated and degraded as a sub-rational lunatic who traffics in baseless conspiracy theories. Let the talking heads talk. But the concerns about the legitimacy of this election are anything but baseless. Evidence abounds. They're counting that our cowardice and shame will be sufficient to make us deny those facts. If we will not testify to that evidence openly, then it might as well not exist. We cannot be cowards and we can't be ashamed. Speak and speak in the knowledge that the only baseless claim is the one that says it is baseless to assert the truth that this election can never be construed as free and fair. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a war on truth. Make no mistake about it. This is a war on truth. All right? And this war has been raging for a very long time. And are the people going to stand up and do something about it? I really don't believe that they will. So I wanted to just leave you with something to think about. I want to start the year off in 2021 thinking, all right? Using the God-given ability to think, okay? And don't be fooled by all the smoke screens, all right? So I just want to let you know that. I just want to put that there for you so you can start off flexing those mental muscles. People like to make New Year's resolutions, okay? They want to work out. Well, work your brain out. Learn how to think. Learn how to really think. All right? Because this is going to be a bumpy ride. All right? Last year was just the beginning. I think we're going to see something much bigger and much worse this month, this year even. And by the way, did you know that Alibaba founder Jack Ma has been missing for 2 months? Was he kidnapped by the CCP for his alleged transgressions against the party? I don't know, but he's missing, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see how they spin that one. Let's see how they spin that one. I would like to see that one. Anyway, you know what it is, man. PulseWaveTrading.com. And remember, bulls make money, bears make money, and pigs get slaughtered. So remember to take what you can and give nothing back. And I'm out. Peace.